This wealthy private jet flight attendant thought she was just protecting her elite cabin when she screamed at a man in a faded hoodie to get off her plane. She had no idea her cruel judgment had just triggered the worst 10 minutes of her life, leaving her crying on her knees on the tarmac as her entire career was erased in a single second. She believed he was just a trespasser with a dirty backpack. But the reality of who this quiet passenger actually was, and the secret test he had planned since the very beginning, will completely break your heart. Before we reveal his true identity, comment below with the flag of the country you are watching from right now. And if you believe true respect doesn't have a price tag, hit that subscribe button for more emotional stories. Chloe Miller smoothed down the front of her tailored navy blue uniform and checked her reflection in the polished glass of the private jet's galley. Every strand of her blonde hair was pinned back into a flawless, tight bun. Her makeup was sharp, her smile practiced, and her posture immaculate. To anyone walking down the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport, Chloe looked like the definition of success. She was a lead flight attendant for Horizon Elite Aviation, a premium private charter company that catered exclusively to the wealthiest people in the world. Her daily life consisted of serving vintage champagne to movie stars, tech moguls, and oil tycoons. She spent her weekends in five-star hotels in Paris, London, and Milan, all on the company's dime. From the outside, Chloe was living a dream that millions of young women would envy. She walked through the private terminals with her head held high, pulling her designer luggage behind her, absorbing the admiring glances from passers-by. She loved the prestige. She loved the fact that when she told people what she did for a living, their eyes widened with instant respect. Chloe had spent years climbing the corporate ladder to get to this specific position, serving on the company's most expensive Gulfstream jet. She prided herself on knowing exactly what the ultra-wealthy wanted before they even asked for it. She could spot a custom-made Italian suit from 50 paces away, and she knew the exact price of a luxury watch just by a quick glance at a passenger's wrist. Inside the cabin of the luxury jet, everything was pristine. The cream-colored leather seats were spotless. The mahogany wood panels gleamed under the soft LED lighting, and the air smelled faintly of expensive lavender and fresh mint. Chloe moved through the cabin, adjusting a silk pillow here and aligning a crystal glass there. This plane was her kingdom, a sanctuary of absolute luxury, where only the elite belonged. She took a deep breath, feeling a familiar wave of pride wash over her. She belonged in this world of privilege. She belonged among the people who didn't look at price tags, the people who ruled the world from 30,000 feet in the air. However, as Chloe finished setting up the premium catering display on the marble countertop, she looked out the small oval window of the aircraft. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The ground crew was busy fueling the aircraft and loading heavy baggage into the cargo hold below. Watching them work, Chloe felt a sudden, sharp pang of anxiety in her chest, a stark contrast to the calm luxury of the cabin. She quickly turned away from the window, shaking her head to clear her mind, forcing her professional, confident smile back onto her face. She adjusted her gold watch, a piece of jewelry that had cost her 3 months' salary, just to ensure she looked like she belonged. She had an important flight ahead of her, and she could not afford to let her focus slip, not even for a single second. As the sound of the air conditioning hummed softly through the empty cabin, Chloe's smile finally dropped, revealing the exhaustion hidden beneath her heavy makeup. She pulled her smartphone out of her apron pocket, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened her banking application. The screen lit up her face, displaying a flashing red notification that she had been trying to ignore all morning. Her main checking account was down to less than $50. Chloe swallowed hard, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. The glamorous life she showcased to the world was nothing more than a fragile house of cards. Her rent for her tiny overpriced apartment in Manhattan was already 2 weeks overdue, and her landlord had threatened eviction if she didn't pay by the end of the week. Her 3 credit cards were completely maxed out, filled with charges from expensive designer clothes, high-end salon visits, and dinners at trendy restaurants, all things she felt she absolutely needed to maintain the illusion of wealth among her rich clients. Every single month, she was drowning a little deeper in debt, barely surviving from one paycheck to the next. This upcoming flight was her only saving grace. Rumors had been flying around the Horizon Elite Aviation corporate headquarters all week that the company's mysterious, low-profile owner had recently stepped down, appointing a brand-new, ultra-wealthy chief executive officer to run the entire global operation. This new boss was reportedly reviewing the profiles of all top-tier flight attendants for a massive promotion to chief corporate instructor, prestigious executive role, based in London that came with a 6-figure salary. paid housing, and an endless expense account. For Chloe, that promotion wasn't just a career milestone. It was the life jacket she desperately needed to pull herself out of financial ruin. She put her phone away quickly as she heard footsteps outside on the metal boarding stairs. Her heart did a nervous flip. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver coin, a cheap token her father had given her years ago, before she left her small hometown for the big city. He had always told her to stay grounded and remember where she came from. It was a worthless piece of metal compared to her luxury watch, but she kept it as a secret habit, rubbing her thumb over its smooth edges whenever her anxiety became too overwhelming to bear. She rubbed it now, praying that this flight would go perfectly and that the new corporate leadership would notice her flawless record. Chloe took a deep breath, smoothing her uniform once more. She couldn't let anyone see her struggle. If the company found out she was facing financial eviction, they would deem her a liability for high-security VIP flights. She needed to look wealthy, confident, and completely in control. She forced the worry out of her eyes, replacing it with her signature, elite charm. She stood near the main cabin door, waiting for the first passengers to arrive, completely unaware that the hidden cracks in her perfect life were about to fracture wide open. The heavy metal door of the jet cabin was propped open, letting in the cool, crisp evening air from the tarmac. Chloe straightened her spine, adjusting her posture to a perfect 90-degree angle as she heard the sound of footsteps steadily climbing up the boarding stairs. She flashed her most dazzling, welcoming smile, ready to greet the elite VIP guest, who was scheduled to board early for a private business trip. But as the figure stepped through the threshold and into the warm, luxurious light of the cabin, Chloe's smile instantly froze. The man walking onto the multi-million-dollar aircraft did not look like any VIP she had ever served. He was a tall, calm black man, wearing a faded gray hooded sweatshirt, simple dark jeans, and scuffed white sneakers. He wasn't carrying any designer luggage, only a worn-out leather backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. He looked completely out of place against the gleaming mahogany wood and cream leather interior of the jet. Chloe's eyes narrowed instantly as her elitist prejudices took over. She didn't see a human being. She saw a threat to her pristine environment, an outsider who clearly did not belong in her world of privilege. She assumed he was either a member of the low-wage airport cleaning crew who had wandered onto the wrong plane, a catering delivery worker who was using the wrong entrance, or worse, someone trying to sneak a peek inside a billionaire's playground. The thought of a low-status worker ruining her perfect cabin setup before her important flight made her blood boil with sudden, sharp anger. Marcus Vance stepped fully into the cabin, his calm eyes looking around the interior with a quiet, observant expression. He didn't look nervous or intimidated by the luxury surrounding him. In fact, he looked completely relaxed, as if he walked onto private jets every single day. He began to walk down the narrow aisle, looking for a place to put his worn backpack down. "Excuse me. Stop right there," Chloe snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet cabin like a sharp knife. She stepped forward, completely blocking the aisle with her body, her hands planted firmly on her hips. Her polite, professional demeanor was completely gone, replaced by a cold, condescending glare. "What do you think you are doing here? You can't just wander in here." Marcus stopped walking and looked at her, his expression entirely unbothered. "Good evening. I am just finding a spot to sit down," he replied, his voice smooth, deep, and remarkably calm. Chloe let out a harsh, mocking laugh, her insecurity and stress manifesting as pure cruelty. "Sit down. Are you out of your mind? Look at yourself. This is a private VIP aircraft, not a public bus terminal. Catering deliveries go around the back, and the ground maintenance crew is not allowed inside the main cabin. You need to turn around right now." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply looked at her gold watch, then back into her angry eyes. "I am not delivery or maintenance. I am a passenger on this flight. A passenger, with no ticket, no suit, and a dirty backpack." Chloe hissed, her face flush with anger as she pointed a manicured finger directly toward the open cabin door. She felt an urgent need to rid her kingdom of this intruder before anyone important saw him. "Get off my plane. Get off right now before I have you arrested for trespassing." The harsh words echoed loudly through the silent, luxurious cabin. Chloe's heart was hammering against her ribs, not from fear, but from a toxic mixture of panic and deep-seated pride. She could feel the precious minutes ticking away, and the absolute last thing she needed was for her wealthy clients, or worse, a corporate inspector, to walk in and see a casually dressed outsider making himself at home on her watch. It would make her look incompetent. It could ruin her chances for the promotion she so desperately needed to pay her overdue rent. Marcus Vance did not flinch, nor did he raise his voice. He stood perfectly still in the narrow aisle, holding his worn leather backpack by the strap. He looked at Chloe with a strange, analytical calm that made her feel deeply uncomfortable. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet, observant disappointment. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Marcus asked softly, his deep voice filled with a strange weight. "You aren't even going to ask for my name or check the flight manifest. I don't need to check anything to know you don't belong here." Chloe snapped back, her voice rising an octave as her frustration boiled over. She hated how calm he was. It felt like he was mocking her authority on her own territory. "Look at you. People who fly on this aircraft wear custom suits and carry black cards. They don't wear faded hoodies and scuffed sneakers. I know exactly who belongs in this world, and you are not one of them." Marcus let out a very quiet, slow breath. He nodded his head once, looking down at the cream leather seats, then back up at Chloe's tense, angry face. "Appearances can be very deceiving. Misty shouldn't be so quick to judge a person's worth by the clothes on their back. Save the lecture for someone who cares," Chloe sneered, reaching over to the cabin wall and grabbing the internal radio phone. Her hand was shaking slightly from the adrenaline running through her veins. She felt a twisted sense of power as she dialed the airport's private terminal security line. She glared at Marcus, expecting him to finally look panicked, expecting him to beg her not to call. But he just stood there, waiting. "Yes, this is Chloe Miller from the Horizon Elite Gulfstream flight." She spoke into the phone, her voice dripping with artificial urgency. "We have an unauthorized individual inside the main cabin, a tall man in a gray hoodie. He is refusing to leave and disrupting flight preparation. Send security to escort him off the tarmac immediately." She slammed the phone back onto its cradle and pointed toward the door again. 10 minutes. That is how long it will take for armed airport security to get up those stairs and drag you out in handcuffs. If you have any dignity left, you will walk down those stairs right now." Marcus looked at her for 3 long seconds. The silence in the cabin was suffocating. Then, without saying another word, he slowly slung his leather backpack over his shoulder. He turned around and walked toward the open cabin door with a calm, dignified pace. Just before he stepped out onto the metal stairs into the cool New York evening, he paused, looking back over his shoulder at Chloe one last time. He didn't look angry. He looked like he was witnessing something incredibly sad. Then, he disappeared down the stairs. Chloe exhaled a long, shaky breath, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead, completely convinced she had just saved her career. She smoothed her navy blue uniform once more, forcing her heart rate to slow down. The intruder was gone, the cabin was pristine again, and she had successfully defended the elite standards of Horizon Elite Aviation. She walked back into the galley, leaning against the marble countertop to catch her breath, waiting for the high-paying VIP clients to finally arrive. 10 minutes passed in complete silence. Chloe checked her gold watch, her brows furrowing in slight confusion. The scheduled departure time was rapidly approaching, yet the terminal gates remained quiet. Suddenly, her corporate smartphone vibrated aggressively in her apron pocket. She pulled it out quickly, expecting a message from the ground crew. Instead, it was an urgent email notification from the chartered dispatch office. The high-profile oil tycoon who had booked the entire jet for the evening had officially canceled his flight due to an emergency meeting in Washington. Chloe's heart sank into her stomach. A cancellation meant no premium tips, no high society networking, and a massive loss of flight hours on her record. Panic began to creep back into her mind as she thought about her overdue rent and her maxed-out credit cards. She rubbed her thumb desperately against the cheap silver coin hidden in her pocket, trying to calm her rising anxiety. Just as she was about to fall into despair, she looked out the oval window and noticed a massive commotion on the tarmac below. A sleek, midnight black, luxury sedan with tinted windows pulled up directly next to the aircraft's boarding stairs. It was flanked by 2 airport security vehicles, their red and blue lights flashing silently against the darkening New York sky. Chloe's eyes widened. This was not a standard client arrival. The doors of the black sedan opened, and 3 people stepped out into the cool evening air. They were wearing expensive charcoal gray corporate suits, carrying heavy leather briefcases, and moving with an intense, calculated urgency. Chloe recognized the man leading the group immediately. It was Mr. Harrison, the Senior Vice President of Human Resources from the global corporate headquarters in London. Beside him was the company's chief legal counsel. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. The corporate executives had arrived in person, unannounced, at the JFK private terminal. The rumors from earlier that week flashed through her mind. The brand-new ultra-wealthy chief executive officer was actively reviewing top-tier staff for the prestigious executive promotion to chief corporate instructor. Her panic instantly transformed into overwhelming excitement. This was it. This was her golden opportunity. The universe was handing her the exact break she needed on a silver platter. The new CEO must have sent his top executive team to inspect her performance in person. She rushed to the mirror, quickly checking her hair, ensuring every strand was perfectly pinned into her tight bun. She fixed her lipstick, plastered her most flawless, professional smile onto her face, and stood at absolute attention near the main cabin door. As the heavy footsteps of the corporate legal team began to echo up the metal boarding stairs, Chloe prepared herself to deliver the performance of her life. Completely unaware that the trap she had set for herself was about to snap shut, she took a deep, steadying breath, lockstepping her ankles together and clasping her hands gracefully in front of her uniform. Mr. Harrison stepped into the cabin first, his face a mask of absolute corporate gravity. He didn't offer his usual polite nod or warm greeting. Behind him, the chief legal counsel and a junior attorney walked in, immediately opening their leather briefcases and pulling out a stack of official corporate documents. The atmosphere inside the luxury jet instantly turned freezing cold, stripping away the cozy warmth of the lavender-scented cabin. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison," Chloe said, her voice filled with a perfect blend of sweetness and professional confidence. "Welcome aboard the Gulfstream. Our scheduled VIP client canceled just a few moments ago, but I have already reset the cabin to absolute perfection. I am fully prepared for any immediate executive assignment." Mr. Harrison didn't smile. He looked around the empty cabin, his eyes lingering on the spot where Marcus Vance had stood just 10 minutes prior. "We are not here for a standard flight inspection, Chloe," he said, his voice flat and ominous. "We are here on a direct order from the Global Board of Directors. An incident report was flagged in our system just 10 minutes ago by airport security." Chloe's heart did a nervous flutter, but she quickly suppressed it. She realized this was her moment to shine, to show the executive team just how fiercely she protected the brand's elite reputation. She stepped forward, her expression morphing into one of deep, artificial concern. "Ah, yes. The security incident," Chloe said quickly, trying to position herself as the hero of the story. "I am so glad you are here to handle it. A few minutes ago, a suspicious, casually dressed black man climbed up into the cabin. He looked completely out of place, faded hoodie, scuffed sneakers, and a dirty old backpack. He had no business being in a luxury environment like this. He was even trying to sit in the VIP section." The legal counsel stopped organizing his papers and looked up at Chloe, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. Mr. Harrison simply stared at her, the silence stretching out between them until it became deafening. "Go on," Mr. Harrison said quietly. "Well, as the lead flight attendant, I knew I had to protect the integrity of this aircraft," Chloe continued proudly, her chest swelling. "He tried to claim he was a passenger, which was obviously a ridiculous lie. So, I took charge. I looked him dead in the eye and told him to get off my plane. When he hesitated, I immediately called airport security and had him escorted off the tarmac for trespassing. I ensured our high standards were not compromised for even a second." Chloe smiled brightly, waiting for Mr. Harrison to praise her quick thinking, waiting for him to write down a glowing recommendation for the London promotion. Instead, the junior attorney sighed softly and shook his head in disbelief. Mr. Harrison's face turned completely pale, a look of profound pity crossing his features. "Chloe," Mr. Harrison said, his voice shaking slightly as he pulled a golden fountain pen from his breast pocket. "You have no idea what you have just done." Chloe's bright smile shattered, the muscles in her face freezing into an awkward, panicked mask. The absolute confidence that had filled her chest just a second ago evaporated, replaced by a sudden, icy drop in her stomach. She looked from Mr. Harrison to the chief legal counsel, who was now sliding a formal, heavy sheet of paper across the mahogany dining table. The paper bore the golden-embossed crest of Horizon Elite Aviation, but across the top, written in bold, terrifying letters, were the words, "Immediate termination and aviation license revocation notice." What is this?" Chloe whispered, her voice losing all its artificial sweetness. Her eyes darted across the text, catching words like gross misconduct, severe ethical violations, and permanent blacklisting. Her hands began to shake so violently that she had to grip the back of a leather seat to keep her balance. "Mr. Harrison, there must be a mistake. I was just doing my job. I was protecting the plane from a trespasser." "There is no mistake, Chloe," the chief legal counsel interrupted, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "By direct order of the board and the executive chairmanship, your employment with Horizon Elite Aviation is terminated effective immediately. Furthermore, A formal complaint has been logged with the Federal Aviation Administration. Your international flight attendant cabin license is being revoked. You will never work on a commercial or private aircraft again. The words hit Chloe like a physical blow. The lavish lifestyle, the trips to Paris, the five-star hotels, the high society, respect everything she had sacrificed her entire adult life to build vanished into thin air in a single fraction of a second. The Manhattan apartment she couldn't pay for, the maxed-out credit cards, the red eviction notices flashing on her phone, all of her hidden financial nightmares rushed to the front of her mind, threatening to suffocate her. "No, please, you can't do this to me," Chloe cried out, tears instantly welling in her eyes, threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. Her pride completely dissolved, replaced by raw, naked desperation. She fell to her knees right there on the cream-colored carpet of the cabin, looking up at the corporate executives with pleading eyes. "My rent is overdue. I have nothing else. I have worked for this company for 5 years with a flawless record. You can't throw my entire life away just because I kicked out a random, suspicious man who didn't even have a ticket." Mr. Harrison looked down at her, a mixture of intense disappointment and sorrow in his eyes. He didn't reach down to help her up. Instead, he took the golden fountain pen and signed his name at the bottom of the termination notice, finalizing the destruction of her career. "He wasn't a random man, Chloe, and he didn't need a ticket," Mr. Harrison said softly, his voice echoing through the silent, cold cabin. "You wanted to impress the new corporate leadership to get that London promotion, didn't you? Well, the man you just humiliated and dragged off this aircraft by security was the exact person you were trying to impress." Chloe stopped breathing, her heart freezing in her chest as a horrible, sickening realization began to take root in her mind. The luxury cabin seemed to spin around her, the pristine cream walls closing in like a trap. Her mind raced backward through the last 20 minutes, replaying every condescending word she had shouted. The sneer on her face, and the calm, steady gaze of the man in the faded gray hoodie. "No," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking as a cold sweat broke out across her forehead. She forced herself up from her knees, her legs shaking so violently she could barely stand. She looked at Mr. Harrison, her eyes wide with terror. "No, that's impossible." He was wearing scuffed sneakers. He had an old backpack. He didn't look like he couldn't be. "He is Marcus Vance," the chief legal counsel stated, his voice sharp and unyielding as he pointed to the top signature line on the corporate documents. "The majority shareholder and the newly appointed chief executive officer of Horizon Elite Aviation. The man who holds the future of this entire company and your career in his hands." Panic, shame, and desperation collided inside Chloe's chest. The promotion wasn't just gone. Her entire life was ruined. She was on the verge of losing her apartment. Her credit was shot, and now she was blacklisted from the only industry she knew. But as the initial shock began to turn into sheer survival instinct, something shifted inside her. She couldn't just sit here and let her life end in this cabin. She had to do something. She had to fix this, even if it meant begging for mercy. "Where is he?" Chloe demanded suddenly, her voice rising as she wiped a rogue tear from her cheek. Her pristine, professional exterior was completely shattered, leaving only a desperate woman fighting for her livelihood. "Where is Mr. Vance right now? Please, Mr. Harrison, let me talk to him. Let me explain. It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to follow security protocol. I can apologize to him." Mr. Harrison let out a long, heavy sigh and checked his watch. "Mr. Vance is currently inside the private VIP terminal lounge, completing the incident paperwork with airport security. But I strongly advise against bothering him, Chloe. The decision has been made. The paperwork is signed." "I don't care," Chloe cried out, her pride entirely gone. She didn't care how pathetic she looked to the legal team. She didn't care about looking wealthy or elite anymore. She only cared about survival. "I have to face him. I need to look him in the eye and tell him I'm sorry." Without waiting for permission, Chloe turned away from the corporate executives. She reached into a pocket, her fingers brushing against the cheap silver coin her father had given her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel disgusted by its cheapness. She felt a sudden, heavy wave of guilt. She had forgotten her father's advice. She had spent so long judging people by their price tags that she had become completely blind to basic human decency. With her heart pounding, a frantic rhythm in her ears, Chloe ran out of the galley and pushed through the main cabin door. She hurried down the metal boarding stairs, her high heels clicking loudly against the steel steps, and rushed across the dark, windy tarmac straight toward the glowing glass doors of the private VIP terminal, ready to face the man whose life she had dismissed and begged for a second chance. She burst through the terminal doors, her hair slightly disheveled and her breathing ragged. There, sitting quietly in a leather armchair in the corner of the lounge, was Marcus Vance. He was still wearing the same faded gray hooded sweatshirt and dark jeans. He was sipping a plain cup of black coffee, calmly reviewing a security log, while a terminal manager stood at absolute attention beside him. "Mr. Vance," Chloe cried out, her voice cracking as she rushed toward him. The terminal security guard stepped forward to block her, but Marcus gently raised a hand, signaling the guard to stand down. Chloe stopped a few feet away from him, her hands trembling, tears finally streaming down her face. The reader thinks that Chloe was just an ordinary, strict flight attendant who happened to fire a random passenger who turned out to be rich, making it a simple case of bad luck. But the reality is, the man she had brutally humiliated and kicked off the aircraft was indeed Marcus Vance, the newly appointed global CEO, who held absolute power over her entire destiny. And because since the very beginning, this entire situation was not an accident at all. Marcus had intentionally put on his oldest clothes, grabbed a worn-out backpack, and boarded the aircraft a full hour before the scheduled departure time as a secret, deliberate test of character for the crew. He knew that the only way to truly understand the soul of his new company was to see how his staff treated a person they thought could do absolutely nothing for them. "Mr. Vance, please," Chloe sobbed, dropping her head in complete shame. "I am so deeply sorry, I thought you were someone who sneaked into the terminal. I thought I was protecting the plane. If I had known who you were, I would never have spoken to you that way." Marcus set his coffee cup down on the table with a soft click. He looked up at her, his expression filled with a calm, profound sadness. "That is exactly the problem, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice quiet but echoing clearly through the empty lounge. "You only treat people with respect if you think they have power, wealth, or a title. If I had walked onto that plane in a $10,000 suit, you would have offered me champagne. But because I wore a hoodie, you called security and told me to get off your plane." Chloe reached into her apron pocket, her fingers wrapping around the cheap silver coin her father had given her to remind her to stay humble. She pulled it out, looking at the worthless piece of metal, realizing how completely she had lost her way in her pursuit of an elite lifestyle. "I was desperate," Chloe whispered honestly, looking at the floor. "My rent is overdue. I am drowning in debt. I wanted that promotion so badly that I became blind." "True professionalism is rooted in humility, not prejudice," Marcus replied firmly, signing the final security clearance. "You didn't fail a flight protocol today, Chloe. You failed a basic test of human decency. The termination stands." The words were spoken with a quiet finality that left no room for negotiation. Chloe stood frozen as Marcus Vance stood up from his armchair, slung his worn leather backpack over his shoulder, and walked past her without another word. The glass doors of the terminal slid open, and he disappeared into the New York night, leaving her completely alone in the middle of the empty, brightly lit VIP lounge. Chloe slowly walked out of the terminal, her high heels dragging against the concrete tarmac. The cool night air hit her face, clearing away the lingering scent of luxury lavender and premium mint. She looked up at the massive Gulfstream jet sitting under the airport floodlights, the kingdom she had ruled just an hour ago, the place where she had felt so superior. Now, she was banned from ever stepping foot inside it again. She walked past the airport security gates and sat down on a cold metal bench outside the public bus stop. She pulled her smartphone out of her pocket. The red notification from her landlord was still there, a stark reminder of the financial ruin waiting for her at home. But for the first time in years, the intense panic didn't come. Instead, a profound wave of clarity washed over her. She looked down at her hands and saw that she was still gripping the cheap silver token her father had given her. Her thumb rubbed over the smooth, worn edges of the coin. She remembered her father's words about staying grounded. Words she had dismissed as the advice of a man who didn't understand the elite world. She realized now that her father was the one who truly understood wealth, the wealth of character, respect, and kindness. In her desperate rush to look like she belonged to the upper class, she had traded her soul for a gold watch and a tailored uniform. She had treated a human being like garbage simply because of his clothes, and that was a debt no credit card could ever pay off. Chloe took off her gold watch, the piece of jewelry that had cost her 3 months' salary, and placed it deep inside her bag. She didn't want to look at it anymore. She didn't want to live a lie anymore. She had lost her glamorous career, her prestige, and her financial security in a single 10-minute mistake. But she had finally found her reality. As the public city bus pulled up to the curb with a loud hiss, Chloe stood up. She didn't feel like the elite flight attendant of Horizon Elite Aviation anymore. She was just Chloe Miller, a woman who had to start over from absolute zero. She boarded the bus, taking a seat among ordinary people, workers in faded jackets, students in simple hoodies, and tired commuters in worn-out sneakers. She looked at them not with judgment, but with a newfound, deep respect. The story of the arrogant flight attendant and the undercover billionaire would eventually spread through the aviation industry as a cautionary tale. But for Chloe, it was the painful, necessary wake-up call that saved her from a lifetime of superficial emptiness. True status is never defined by the price of your clothes or the luxury of your surroundings, but by how you treat those who can do absolutely nothing for you.